Hey, in this video, we're going to cover off a really fundamental error we see a lot of businesses make when they run webinars and how to avoid it so that you can capture some more leads from your upcoming webinars that you're running or not running. So let's get stuck in. Thanks so much for joining. It's Mandy Brasser here from Streamline for Success. And whether you've used Infusionsoft or not, this video is still going to apply to you because I'm going to cover off one of the biggest mistakes that we see businesses make all the time when they run webinars, including ourselves. We made these mistakes early on, so I want to share with you what you can do about it to avoid it. So one of the big things around webinars, it's a great way to reach out to new contacts or engage your existing list or your clients to deliver content to a number of people at the one time. So it's a really great tool. We love webinars and we do them all the time. Now, a lot of the time we see that businesses run webinars to capture new leads, which is a fantastic strategy. And this is actually one of our landing pages that we have used in the past. And as you can see, it's focused on Infusionsoft users. So I want to firstly say it doesn't actually matter whether you use Infusionsoft or not. This video still applies to you. So this is just an example I wanted to give you. Now, we run this webinar at least once a year, maybe twice, maybe 3 times a year, depending on what we've got going on. Now, one of the fundamental things that I want to stress to you here firstly is making sure that if you are running a webinar, whether it's a one-off webinar or you're going to continue to run that same topic again in the future, you want to make sure your URL is generic. Now, the reason why we recommend that is we've had other clients who have and contacts who have come to us with their things already set up, and they've got all these date-specific URLs. And I understand that sometimes that's really helpful to track, say for something like August 2018 or something like that, and then you would have an August 2016, and so on and so forth. Now, yes, it can be handy to track. However, if you're running any type of advertising or if you're emailing your list, having those generic URLs, if they get shared and your webinar finishes, like you can see here, this one finished in December, you potentially might lose those leads even though you've paid for advertising or someone's come across an old email of yours or they've been sent it from a friend or a colleague. And if they come to this page, then all of a sudden they're like, this isn't, this is in the past. I can't really do anything about it. I've missed out. So one of the important things that we kind of stress with our clients is keeping this generic. So next time you have the next date, you can just easily update this and it doesn't affect any of your existing links that are out there, which is super handy. But secondly is that if someone comes along to this page and the webinar is over, you can still capture them as a lead. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that we do here to capture those leads. So it's really, really important. Keep the URL generic, and then you want to see how you can capture these leads. So we really identify a couple of opportunities here, a couple of options for you. If once you finish the webinar, what can you do with these contacts, or what can you do to change this page? Now, firstly, you might have the option to send them the replay. Now, that might depend on your marketing strategy and what the content is about, and if the replay does make sense to send to people at a later date, even though it's not, they weren't specifically live on that webinar or recently signed up for the replay. So that's something to keep in mind. So that might be your first option. And that way, look, they're clearly into the content and they're going to get that particular webinar that they weren't able to join live. So that's one option. The second option that we recommend is setting up a wait list. So for us, as I mentioned, we run this webinar every year or a couple of times a year. So we plan on running this webinar again in the future. Now, if we set up this page and have this opt-in that talks about joining the wait list for the next one, then potentially we're going to capture some more leads because they've come to this page because they're interested in this specific topic, so that, ideally we can capture some leads that way. Now, the third one is you might want to change this offer. You might want to completely change this page, offer something else that might be relevant to this concept of monetizing Infusionsoft in this instance, and put a completely new offer on here. So that's a third option. Now, there's probably more options out there, but they're the main three that we sort of talk about. And really, for a lot of the time, we really focus on the wait list. And we do that, as I said, because we're going to run this webinar again. And then as someone comes into this particular opt-in, then we can talk to them about relevant content around this topic that they're actually interested in. Now, I want to kind of flag with you too, another reason why you want to do this, not only because your advertising is out there and that potentially people can come in late, but sometimes, and I've seen it for ourselves as well as our clients, that sometimes people don't read the date, and that's okay, but they actually sign up to the webinar after the webinar has finished. And it could be that they want to get access to the replay, but that's another reason why you want to go ahead and do that. So, as I mentioned, there's three options, and I'm going to talk about how to actually make it happen. And before I do though, when is the best time to do it? Now, as I said, this webinar finished in December. You can see the time left for the webinar to start is 0. Ideally, you want to do it as soon as possible once the webinar is finished, because if you've been very active in your marketing, you're probably going to have some more leads come into this particular page as the webinar is happening, or potentially just shortly after, or not in the future. So we recommend you do this as soon as possible. Now, the only, I guess, hesitation there or consideration is if you were doing this live and the replay may not be available just yet. So that might be something that you want to kind of think about in terms of timeframes. So now let's get stuck into the steps. What are the steps that we need to take to make sure that anyone coming to this page can actually go in and sign up to different things? So there's a few things that we need to update here. So firstly, we need to update the landing page. So we need to go in here, update any reference to dates. It's all your call about the timer and the offer. The call to action that you have on this page, it's probably worthwhile you kind of mentioning the fact join the wait list or something like that. So I'm not a copywriting guru. I certainly don't come out and claim that at all. So definitely recommend getting some work done on the copy here. Just test to see what's going to work and update this detail here. The other component that you need to do in relation to the landing page is a lot of the time you're doing the opt-in, you've got the opt-in form here, and then you're going to redirect them to a thank you page once they've signed up for the webinar or to join the waiting list or the replay or anything like that. So you want to make sure that thank you page also reflects the action that they've just taken. A lot of the time with webinars, we have the thank you page redirecting to a page that's specific to this particular webinar, date and time. Might be a calendar functionality to add it automatically to their calendar if they click on a button, and details about the webinar. Now, because in this case we are not actually getting them to attend that particular webinar, it's important that the copy, messaging and everything like that is also updated on the thank you page. So word of warning, when you do go ahead and put in a new date in the future, just make sure as well that you remember to go back and update that thank you page to be the old thank you page with the webinar details and those sorts of things. So we've got update the copy on the landing page, you've got to update the thank you page. Now in terms of the follow-up, any autoresponders that you've got set up. Now we use Infusionsoft, but the concepts still apply whether you use any other tool out there. So let me jump into the campaign here. We have two possible kind of setups that we've done. I won't go through everything here in this part of the campaign, but right now is anyone registering, they can come in here, we apply a webinar date, and we register them on the back end to our webinar platform. So that all happens. Now we've got an option here for I should say, a late registration offer webinar. So they could go in here, and what we're going to do is tag them. We're going to send them the link for the webinar replay, and then a couple of days later we're going to send them some other details. So that might be something that you want to have a look at. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the time we like to go to wait lists, so this is the sequence for that. We've got some tagging happening, and then we've got an email saying, hey, something like, thanks so much for your interest in the webinar. Unfortunately, you've missed it. Please go ahead. I think we've got it here. I'll just show you. It's very basic copy, nothing fancy, but just saying we'll be in touch, and we'll keep you up to date with relevant information in the meantime, whilst we kind of run the next webinar, those sorts of things. So that's in there as well. Now, it's important, of course, that we don't forget about these people, because they've said, hey, I'm interested, but you're not running one right now. We want to make sure we remember who they are. So in Infusionsoft, we're going to tag them with a particular tag. Now, we've got a few going on here. They've opted in for that particular webinar. It's a late registration, and what type of prospect that they are, and those sorts of things. So we've got some other segmentation happening on them as well. That's a whole nother topic. So at any time, I can run a report in Infusionsoft, which I'm sure you can do in Infusionsoft or your CRM, and look at anyone who's had a late registration. Because the next time I run this webinar, I need to, well, ideally I want to reach out to those contacts and make sure that, hey, they know about the webinar, and reference to the fact that the action that they took previously was they signed up. We didn't have an upcoming webinar available for that particular topic, and we're about to run another one. So here's the link in which to do so. So that's what I would recommend you do. So right now, I'm just going to kind of connect this up. So at the moment, we don't want them going into the December side of things. We want them going into the wait list. So what we would do, and at the moment we're not going to do the late registration offer replay, we're just going to go straight to the wait list. And then we would also need to update the thank you page in there as well. So that's really it. So we would go ahead and republish this particular campaign, and that's pretty much the key steps here. Now, is it going to generate hundreds or thousands of leads? Probably not. Some could argue that it may not be worthwhile even doing this step. We have gathered probably a handful of extra leads that with some of the webinar setups that we've done personally in our business, but you know, we don't have big affiliates or a huge advertising campaign that we've run to really fill these webinars in the first place. So depending on how much collateral that you've got out there and the chance of people coming in later, or that, you know, just leads are incredibly valuable for you, this shouldn't take too long to do. So as I said, I would recommend doing it because it can potentially be that one lead that could convert into that client that you're looking for. So really that's kind of the steps that I wanted to go through today in this video. So just to recap, why do you want to do it? Because if you've gone to the effort of putting a webinar landing page up there, you want to make sure you can kind of capitalize on that audience once your webinar is done. And if you plan on doing that particular topic in the future, then you want to capture those leads for next time that you do it. And you know how you go about doing those steps. So updating the landing page, updating the thank you page, updating the campaign, and ensuring that you're communicating and reinforcing the action that they've taken, and letting them know how you're going to be in communication with them or send them the replay, those sorts of things. And of course, as I mentioned before, the most important thing here is ensuring that you communicate back when you are running that webinar again. Really, really important, and keep them in communication about relevant topics as well in the meantime if it's going to be a little while before you run that webinar. So I really hope you found this video helpful, because as I said, particularly when we look back at some of the businesses that have reached out to us for help, just having the different dates and not even addressing the fact that people can come to this page after a webinar is done, really important, so make sure you cover that off. All right, it's Mandy Brasser here from Streamline for Success. Thanks for checking out this video, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.